I was 22 years old at the time, living in one of those tired, rundown apartments that sit directly above a convenience store in what used to be the old downtown area. This was the kind of neighborhood that slowly faded once the town got its first Walmart. The buildings were old, the sidewalks cracked, and the whole place had a worn-out feeling to it. Yet even though it was a busy part of town, I still recognized most of my neighbors. I knew the regulars who drifted in and out of the bars next door and across the street. The same faces showing up day after day, like characters in a small, repeating play. There was a stretch of about 4 months when I was unemployed. Every single morning during that time, I would walk down to the convenience store right beneath my apartment. I'd grab a cup of coffee, a fresh pack of cigarettes, and whatever odds and ends my husband, my boyfriend back then, and I needed for the house. It was a simple, predictable routine that gave some small structure to those empty days. After a while, I started noticing a silver Honda minivan that parked in the exact same spot across the street from my building almost every day. It stood out to me precisely because it was so consistent. In a neighborhood where cars came and went, this one vehicle returned like clockwork and claimed the same patch of curb. The driver wasn't anyone I recognized from the surrounding businesses, neither a worker nor a regular customer. So my curiosity slowly grew. Who was this guy, and why did he park there every single day? One morning, I decided to watch more closely from my apartment window. I waited, coffee in hand, peering through the blinds. To my surprise, the man never got out of the van. He would pull into the spot, sit there for several hours, and eventually drive away. The more I paid attention, the more I realized I had never once seen him leave the vehicle. He just stayed inside. I watched him for a few more days to be sure. The pattern held. He arrived, remained seated behind the wheel, and left later without ever stepping foot outside. That realization sent my mind racing. I started trying to come up with reasonable explanations for his strange daily routine, but the longer I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. Maybe he was on a long break from work. Maybe he was a private investigator on a stakeout. Maybe he was a process server waiting for someone to come home. Or maybe he was just a creep. Maybe he was watching me. It was unsettling enough that I began making a mental note of the van's presence every day. Still, it wasn't quite alarming enough for me to call the police or walk over and confront him. Not yet. Then one day my husband came home early from work. As soon as his car turned into the parking lot, the silver minivan pulled away abruptly. That was different. Normally the van stayed until around 2 in the afternoon, but this time it was barely noon. Was it a coincidence? Probably. Did it creep me out? Absolutely. That moment pushed me over the edge. I decided I wasn't going to just sit there wondering anymore. I wanted the man in the van to know that I had noticed him, that I saw him there every single day. At first, I would stop on my way to the store, turn, and stare directly at him for a long moment, trying to make eye contact. I did this for several days. Then I took it further. One afternoon, I walked out onto the street with a notepad and pen in my hand, making it very obvious as I wrote down his license plate number right there in front of him. After that, I started dragging a lawn chair outside. I would sit on the sidewalk, light a cigarette, and simply stare at the van while I smoked. He definitely noticed. Our eyes would meet through the windshield, and he would quickly look away. I can't tell you how many times I thought about walking right up to the driver's side window and asking him straight out why he parked there for hours every day and never once got out of the vehicle. The words were on the tip of my tongue more than once, but I never quite said them. After about 3 or 4 days of this silent staring contest, the silver Honda minivan stopped appearing. It simply vanished from its usual spot across the street. I never saw it again. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he was doing there. Sometimes I think back on that strange period in my life and wonder, did he see me as the crazy young woman who used to sit outside and stare at him while he was just trying to work or do whatever it was he was actually doing? The year was 1991, and I was just 6 years old, living in Winnipeg. My family was already deep in the middle of an unthinkable nightmare. Only days earlier, my 10-year-old sister, Robin, had passed away. I was now the only child left in our house, and the grief was heavy, suffocating, and constant. It filled every room like thick smoke, making it hard to breathe. I needed to escape, even for a little while, so I went over to my friend Holly's place, hoping for any small shred of normal childhood. We did what we always did on warm summer days. We hopped on our bikes and started riding around the block. It was a beautiful, quiet afternoon. The sun shone gently, birds chirped in the trees, and the air felt peaceful. The kind of day where you truly believe nothing bad could possibly happen. But on our third lap around the neighborhood, everything changed. We noticed a van. It was a beat-up, dirty white freezer van, the kind with no windows in the back, just a solid, rusted metal shell that looked like it had seen far too many rough miles. As it approached us, it didn't simply drive past like other cars. Instead, it slowed to a crawl. The engine made a horrible, rhythmic rattling sound, like metal grinding painfully against metal. At 6 years old, we didn't immediately feel the sharp sting of stranger danger. We were mostly just confused. We actually slowed our bikes and came to a stop to see what the people inside wanted. The van stopped right alongside us, idling heavily with that same unsettling rattle. The passenger window was already rolled all the way down, revealing a pitch-black interior that seemed to swallow the bright summer sunlight. I looked at the passenger, and the image has been burned into my memory ever since. He was gaunt and sickly looking, with yellowed teeth and long, frizzy, straggly hair that appeared as though it hadn't been washed in weeks. Then the world seemed to slip into slow motion. The passenger door swung open. The man placed one heavy foot onto the pavement, shifting his weight forward as if he was preparing to lunge toward us. At the exact same moment, I heard the heavy, clunky thud of the side sliding door beginning to retract. The passenger didn't even look directly at us. Instead, he turned his head back into the darkness of the van and spoke 7 words I will never forget in my life. "You grab one, I'll grab the other." He said it loud enough for us to hear clearly, as if he didn't care at all that we were listening. Pure, ice-cold adrenaline surged through our small bodies. We didn't scream or cry out. We simply slammed our feet onto the pedals with every ounce of strength we had. Our hearts hammered so hard against our ribs that it actually hurt. We were only a few houses away from safety, but those seconds felt endless. We didn't even bother with our kickstands. We simply ditched the bikes, letting them fall onto the grass in Holly's driveway, and scrambled desperately inside. We slammed the front door behind us and threw the lock with shaking hands. Holly's mom was inside the house and looked immediately confused. Seeing us burst in crying and trembling, she assumed we had just fallen off our bikes and scraped our knees. We were gasping for breath, desperately trying to tell her that a van had been following us and that the men inside wanted to grab us. To her ears, the rattling engine, still audible outside, just sounded like ordinary street noise. There was no reason for her to feel afraid until she really looked at our faces and saw the sheer, unmistakable terror in our eyes. She walked quickly to the front window. Her face went completely pale. She saw the van. She watched as it slowly, deliberately crept past the house, moving almost at a walking pace. Our bikes were lying right there on the front lawn like bright neon markers, telling the men exactly where we had gone. Holly's mom stayed glued to that window, her hand resting protectively on the lock. She kept telling us in a calm voice that everything was going to be okay, but she never once took her eyes off the street. She stayed there, watching, until the horrible rattling engine finally faded away into the distance. Later, when my mom came to pick me up, she was already a shell of herself, shattered by the recent loss of my sister. Having to tell her that I had almost been taken, that she had nearly lost her only remaining child in the same terrible week, devastated her completely. It was a second trauma piled brutally on top of a still bleeding wound. Even now, all these years later, I still carry the weight of that realization. If we had been just a few seconds slower on our bikes that day, my mother's world would have been completely extinguished. I was 23 years old when I traveled to Vietnam last year to visit my little sister. At the time, she had been working there for a few months on an internship, and I was excited to see her after so long. Before leaving, I bought an eSIM so I could easily arrange a grab ride from the airport to Hanoi. Unfortunately, the eSIM wasn't working at all when I landed. I was standing there, tired and a little lost, when a taxi driver approached me and asked if I needed a ride. I knew he would probably overcharge me, but I didn't have many options. I couldn't call my sister or use the internet, so I accepted the ride. He seemed nice and could speak English, so we had a pleasant little chat as we started the journey. About 15 minutes into the drive, he told me his shift was finished and that he would transfer me to one of his colleagues to get me the rest of the way into Hanoi. I wasn't too surprised. My sister had told me this kind of thing was fairly common in South Asia, drivers handing off clients when their shift ended. It had happened to her a few times before, so I just accepted it. I was exhausted from the long trip and didn't think much of it at the time. But the moment I got into the next taxi, I had a really bad feeling. First, there was no camera inside the vehicle, which I knew was mandatory for Grab drivers in Vietnam. Second, I asked him multiple times if he needed the address. He never answered. I tried in English first, then used Google Translate to say it in Vietnamese twice. Instead of responding, he started driving faster. The more I asked, the quicker he went, still completely silent. Panic began to rise inside me. I started speaking loudly, demanding he answer, and I tried to open the doors. Of course, they were locked. He was driving. And by then, we were already on the highway. My heart was racing. I quickly took out my real SIM card, put it in my phone, and called my sister. In my head, I thought, fuck it. If I have to pay a lot for roaming, so be it. She answered right away. I tried to tell her as much as I could in those frantic moments. She was with her Vietnamese colleague, and she had the brilliant idea to speak to me in Vietnamese on the phone, loudly and clearly. She said that I was smart for noting down the license plate number, that you can never be too sure, but she was confident everything was going to be all right. To be honest, I hadn't actually written down the license plate, but her lie was very clever. The driver reacted for the first time. He asked me, in Vietnamese, what the exact address was because he didn't know where to go once we reached Hanoi. My sister's colleague answered for me on the phone. I didn't understand any of this at the time since I don't speak Vietnamese. Her colleague explained everything to me the next day. From that moment on, the driver seemed stressed. He was tapping nervously on the steering wheel. He stayed mostly silent for the rest of the ride, but I could feel him looking at me through the interior mirror. Eventually, after about 30 minutes, he got me to the right address. He literally ejected my luggage from the trunk, took the money, And yes, he overcharged me. But at that point, I was just incredibly relieved to be alive. He drove away very fast. I didn't even have time to note down his license plate. Despite that frightening experience, I still had a wonderful trip in Vietnam. I take transit home every single day, and the whole journey usually takes me about 2 hours. The last leg is a 45-minute bus ride. While I'm waiting for that final bus, I often see the same homeless man pacing back and forth with his shopping cart. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about something like that. I work with homeless youth, so I'm used to seeing people in difficult situations. But this man stood out to me because he kept staring at various women and even tried to start conversations with some of them. That put me on high alert, so I quickly put in my headphones to clearly signal that I wasn't open to talking. When the bus finally pulled up, he noticed me and got on the same bus. He walked straight over and sat down right next to me. At first, I didn't even realize he was trying to start a conversation because my headphones were in. But when I turned my head slightly to check what stop we were approaching, he took that small movement as an invitation. He started getting visibly angry that I wasn't responding to him. He raised his voice, and even though I'm hard of hearing, I could hear him talking over my headphones. I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but the tone was aggressive and escalating. Then, in my peripheral vision, I saw him start touching himself over his jeans. My stomach dropped. I was texting one of my guy friends at the time, and I quickly told him what was happening on the bus. I became really paranoid that this man was going to follow me all the way home, especially since the bus stop is very close to my house. So I decided to get off 2 stops early, near the shopping center, hoping to lose him in a busier area. But this man got off at the exact same stop as me. I tried to rationalize it in my head. It was a shopping center, after all. Maybe he just wanted to hang out there. I quickly dipped into the closest building, which was a Panda Express. Moments later, I saw him following me inside the area. He stood outside smoking a cigarette, clearly waiting for me to come out. I decided the best thing to do was buy some food, sit inside, and wait him out, hoping he would eventually get bored and leave. Here's where I made my mistake. I started eating toward the back of the restaurant, in a spot where I could still turn around and check if he was outside. I thought that if my back was turned, it would clearly signal I wasn't interested. I was about a third of the way through my meal when I turned around to look. He was no longer outside. He was sitting in the booth directly behind me, with his back to me. A wave of fear hit me. I immediately packed up the rest of my food, threw it into my mobility device, and made a beeline for the exit as fast as I could. At that point, my friend called me to check if I was safe. I was walking as quickly as possible toward home. I turned around to see if he was still following, and I saw him still inside Panda Express. But through the window, I could clearly see him throwing his arms up and yelling at me. I started speed walking home as fast as my body would allow. It's about a mile from the shopping center to my house, which is a lot for me. The entire way, I kept anxiously looking over my shoulder, terrified he might appear behind me. Thankfully, he didn't follow me the rest of the way. Maybe he had a full plate of food, or maybe something else distracted him. I truly don't know how long he had been behind me before that. My friend stayed on the phone with me the entire walk until I got safely inside my house. He continued talking to me for a while afterward so I could calm down from the intense anxiety I was feeling. For the rest of that week, I was too scared to take the bus again. I took Ubers home instead, which cost around $40 each time. Thankfully, I haven't seen him at the bus stop since that day. I really hope he never comes back. It was one of those quiet February nights in a town so small that everyone knows everyone, and somehow still no one really knows anyone. I was 16, still in high school, working the weekend night shift at the Dollar General. Most nights we closed at 10, but it usually stretched past 10:15 because my coworker and I had to clean, restock, and make the place look presentable for the morning crew. I wasn't crazy about my coworker. She wasn't cruel, exactly, just cold. She had a way of making every shift feel longer than it needed to be. But that night, things were going surprisingly smooth. The store was dead. A few customers trickled in and out, but mostly it was just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft music leaking from my single earbud. I was walking the aisles, pulling products forward so the shelves looked full, the way they teach you on day one. My coworker was a few aisles over doing the same thing, yanking old coupons off the shelves. Everything felt normal. I had just stepped behind the register when the automatic door slid open. At first, no one came in. Just cold night air rolling across the floor. I figured someone was hesitating outside. Then he appeared. He was an older man, short, with a scruffy beard that looked like it hadn't seen a trim in weeks. He moved slowly, almost deliberately. I gave him my best retail smile. "Hi, welcome in." He stopped just inside the doorway and stared at me. Not at the store, at me. The smile on my face started to feel heavy. Finally he spoke. "Hello, sweetheart." The word landed wrong. I was 16. He was old enough to be my grandfather. Something about the way he said it made my skin tighten. He asked, casual as anything, "You guys got any chocolate milk?" I was in the middle of ringing up another customer, but I pointed toward the back coolers anyway. "Yeah, it should be in the dairy section, right over there." He nodded and disappeared down the aisle. A minute later, he was back at the register, empty-handed. "You don't have any," he said. I blinked. "I'm pretty sure we do. I saw some earlier." "No," he insisted, his voice sharpening. "There's none out there. Can you check the back for me?" I felt my stomach twist a little. We almost never keep cold items like milk in the stockroom. It's not refrigerated back there. But he wasn't taking no for an answer. He leaned on the counter, eyes locked on me. "I really can't right now," I told him. "I'm the only one up here on register. You'll have to wait a few minutes." He didn't like that. His face changed, not angry exactly, but agitated, frustrated. He muttered something under his breath, turned around, and walked out. The doors hissed shut behind him. I tried to shake it off. Just another weird customer. Small towns get them sometimes. The rest of the shift dragged on. Around 10:10, we started closing procedures. I did one final walkthrough of the aisles, straightening things, making sure nothing looked picked over. That's when I reached the milk coolers. And there it was. Chocolate milk. Not one carton. Every single kind we carried. Regular, 2%, whole milk. All sitting right where they were supposed to be. Rows of it. Impossible to miss. My stomach dropped so fast I actually felt dizzy. I stood there staring at those cartons like they were evidence in a crime scene. He had lied. Straight to my face. There was no way he missed them. The cooler is maybe 15 feet long. You'd have to be blind. That's when the thoughts started flooding in. Why would he lie about something so simple? Why push so hard for me to go into the back room alone? Why call me sweetheart and stare like that? Why get agitated when I wouldn't leave the register? I walked straight to my coworker, voice shaking a little. "Hey, remember that old guy who came in asking for chocolate milk? I just checked the cooler. It's full. Like, completely full." She barely looked up from what she was doing. "You're overreacting," she said. It was probably nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. I kept replaying it the whole drive home. The slow way he entered. The way he stood there staring before speaking. The way he said sweetheart. The way he tried to separate me from the only other person in the store and get me into the back. I don't know what his plan was. Maybe he just wanted to get me alone. Maybe it was worse than that. I'll never know for sure. But I do know this. There was chocolate milk in every kind that night. And he knew it. Since then, I've never worn just one earbud at work. I keep both eyes on the door. And every time an older man calls me sweetheart, I feel that same cold drop in my stomach. If you work nights, especially if you're young and especially if you're alone, trust that feeling. Don't brush it off like my coworker did. Sometimes the scariest things don't look scary at first. Sometimes they just look like a tired old man asking for chocolate milk. And sometimes they're counting on you believing that.